Hello, and welcome back to Today English Podcast. My name is Laura, and I'm here to guide you on your journey to clear, confident, and natural English. If you're new here, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss a lesson. Your support truly helps this channel grow. All right, take a deep breath, relax, and let's begin today's session. In this story, I want to take you to a very quiet room, a place where the world feels soft and gentle, a place where your mind can breathe, because this is the beginning of our long journey about how to stay focused while studying, and in this journey, you will follow a young learner named Daniel, a student who has big dreams but a very distracted mind, and as I tell this story, I speak slowly and clearly, like a calm friend sitting beside you, helping you understand every word, every moment, every emotion, and at the start of this story, we find Daniel in his bedroom on a rainy afternoon, sitting at his small wooden desk, trying to study, trying to stay focused, but his eyes keep moving to the window, then to his phone, then to the notebook, then again to his phone, and he sighs because he feels that studying should be simple, but somehow it feels like a mountain, and while the rain taps gently against the glass, he whispers to himself, "Why can't I just focus?" And this question is the first spark of our story, the hook that brings you in, because maybe you have asked yourself this same question many times. Maybe when you sit with your books or your laptop, your mind feels full of noise, and maybe the noise is not from outside, but from inside. From thoughts that jump around like little animals that never sleep, and Daniel feels the same. So he decides to close his eyes for a moment and breathe slowly. And as he breathes, he remembers something his teacher once told him. Focus is not something you find, it's something you build. And those words return to him now, soft and gentle, almost like someone is speaking them again in his mind. And when he opens his eyes, he looks around his room and he realizes the problem is not only the distractions, but also his own belief that focusing should be easy, when in truth, focus is like a quiet room inside your mind. A room you must enter with intention, with calm, with patience, and as the rain keeps falling, he looks at his messy desk, full of open books, old papers, pens, sticky notes, a cold cup of coffee, and his phone flashing with new notifications, and he understands that the world around him is pulling him in different directions. And because of that, his mind does the same. So he stands up slowly, takes a deep breath, and starts to clean the desk, not because he suddenly loves cleaning, but because he wants to make a small change, and sometimes a small change can open a big door. And he puts the pens in a cup, stacks the books neatly, throws away old papers, closes the apps on his phone, and places it face down in a drawer. And as he does this simple action, he feels a tiny bit lighter, like his thoughts are stretching, relaxing, becoming more clear. And when the desk is clean, he sits down again and looks at the empty space in front of him, a quiet space, a space for studying, and this simple change becomes the context of our story, the first step on his journey to understand focus, and he opens his notebook and writes at the top of the page, "How to stay focused today," and as he writes these words, he smiles a little because somehow the question feels smaller now, more friendly, like something he can face, but just when he starts to study. A new challenge appears, not from his phone, not from the outside world, but from inside his own thoughts, because even with a clean desk and a quiet room, his mind begins to wander again, thinking about dinner, thinking about a friend, thinking about something he saw online yesterday, and he feels frustrated because he cleaned the desk, he prepared the space, he tried to breathe, but his attention still slips away, and he wonders if something is wrong with him, but in truth nothing is wrong. Because the mind is like a river and focus is like learning to swim, and in the beginning you don't control the river, you simply learn to move with it, and Daniel does not understand this yet, but he is about to explore it, and so he decides to pause again, and this time he does not clean or breathe. He simply observes his thoughts, like clouds in the sky passing above him, and he notices something strange. The thoughts do not stay forever. They pass quickly. They appear. They disappear. And his attention follows them, and he realizes that maybe the secret to focus is not to fight the distractions, but to understand how the mind moves. And with that realization, he starts to explore a new idea, the idea of gentle focus, a type of attention that does not force the mind, does not fight the thoughts, but simply returns to the task again and again, like a friend who keeps coming back to a conversation. And as he tries this, he studies one sentence, then loses focus, then returns. Then studies another sentence, loses focus again, returns again, and he notices something important. Every time he returns, it becomes slightly easier, slightly more natural, and this gives him hope, because maybe focus is a skill, not a talent, something you build slowly, patiently, like stacking stones until they form a tower. And after a few minutes of this gentle practice, something surprising happens inside him, a small shift, a quiet moment of clarity. As if the noise inside his mind becomes softer, and the words on the page begin to feel closer, easier to understand, almost like they are speaking to him, and this small shift is the beginning of transformation. The moment when Daniel realizes that focus is not a battle. It is a balance, a dance between the mind and the moment, and when he understands this, he feels calmer, he feels lighter, and the rain outside now sounds peaceful instead of distracting, like a soft background song helping him stay present. And after some time he closes his notebook and leans back in his chair, not because he is tired, but because he has learned something important, something he wants to remember, something he wants to reflect on, and he whispers to himself, maybe focus begins before the studying, not during it. And as he says these words, he feels a warm sense of clarity, because he understands that setting the space, calming the mind, accepting the wandering thoughts, all these small actions create a foundation for focus. And he smiles because he finally feels like he is building something real, something useful, something that will help him not only today, but also tomorrow and the next day and every day after. And this moment becomes the takeaway of this first part of his journey, the lesson that you and I can hold on to as well, that focus is not something that suddenly appears. It is something you prepare for, something you invite gently into your study time. And as the rain slowly begins to fade and the clouds outside start to break open, Daniel closes his notebook, stands up, stretches his arms, and feels ready for the next step in his learning journey, a journey that will take him to new ideas, new challenges, and new moments of clarity. And as he walks out of the quiet room, he does not leave the lesson behind. He carries it with him, knowing that tomorrow he will return to this space, this calm, this gentle focus. And he hopes that little by little, he will build a mind that can stay with the moment, stay with the page, stay with the learning, and stay with the quiet power of focus. In this second part of our long journey, I want to take you deeper into Daniel's thoughts, into the soft and quiet space inside his mind where focus begins, where attention grows, and where distractions live like little birds that keep flying from branch to branch. Because after that first rainy afternoon, Daniel wakes up the next morning with a new intention, a simple one, a gentle one, the intention to understand his wandering mind instead of fighting it. And as the sun rises softly over the roofs of the houses outside his window, he stretches slowly, rubs his sleepy eyes, and remembers the calm moment from yesterday when the noise in his mind faded and the studying began to feel easier. And he smiles because he wants to feel that again. He wants to learn how to create that space every time he sits down with his books, and so he walks to the kitchen, makes a warm cup of tea, and sits for a moment in silence, not checking his phone, not thinking about his homework, simply sitting. Breathing, letting the morning settle around him like soft light, and he thinks to himself that maybe focus is not something you turn on like a switch. Maybe it is something you prepare for, gently, patiently, the way you prepare the soil before planting a seed. And after a few minutes, he stands up, takes his tea, and walks back to his bedroom. But this time the room feels a little different, maybe because of the quiet morning light, maybe because of the small change inside him, and when he sits at his desk, he notices that, even though he cleaned the space yesterday, his mind is beginning to fill with new thoughts today. Thoughts about the messages he hasn't answered, thoughts about the video he wants to watch, thoughts about a small worry he has for the future. And he sighs gently because he realizes something important. Distractions never disappear completely. They return every day, like waves that come back to the shore again and again, and if waves cannot be stopped, then the best thing to do is to learn how to move with them, not against them, and so he decides to explore a new idea, the idea of observing the distractions instead of letting them control him, and he puts his hands on the desk, closes his eyes, and tries to listen to the movement of his thoughts, and at first everything feels strange, like standing in a busy street where cars are rushing in every direction, and there is noise, and there is motion, and nothing feels still, but then he breathes slow and steady, and little by little the noise becomes softer, not silent, but softer, like moving from a loud room into a quieter one where you can finally hear yourself again. And as he observes this movement in his mind, he notices something new, something he didn't see before. The thoughts are not all the same. Some are heavy, some are light, some come from fear, some come from curiosity, some are about the past, some are about the future, and the more he observes them, the more he sees that these thoughts are not him. They are just visitors passing through the open door of his mind, and he does not need to chase them or fight them. He simply needs to watch them as they come and go, and when he understands this, he feels a small clarity rising inside him, like a quiet flame growing in the darkness, and he opens his eyes slowly and writes on a fresh page in his notebook, "My mind wanders, and that is okay." And the moment he writes it, he feels something release inside him, a small tension leaving his chest, because now he understands that wandering thoughts are not a failure, they are natural, they are human, and by accepting them he can finally learn to guide them. And after writing these words, Daniel begins to study again, reading a short chapter for his class, and at first it goes well. His eyes move slowly across the lines, his mind absorbs the ideas, his understanding grows like soft waves on a calm lake. But then a distraction appears, a small one, a tiny thought about a message he wants to send, and for a moment his concentration slips away. But instead of feeling frustrated or guilty, he smiles gently, because he remembers the words he wrote. My mind wanders, and that is okay, and he returns to the sentence in his book without judgment, without anger, without believing that he must be perfect, and when he returns to the page, something happens that surprises him. The sentence feels clearer, easier, almost brighter, like his attention is more awake after the short distraction, and he realizes something. Focus is not a straight path. Focus is a cycle. You leave, you return, you leave again, you return again, and every return makes the focus stronger. And as he continues reading, he begins to enjoy this cycle, this gentle rhythm between wandering and returning, between distraction and clarity. And with every return, he feels himself learning not only the content of the book, but also something deeper, something about the way his own mind works, and this understanding becomes a small transformation inside him. A quiet shift that changes the way he sees studying, not as a war but as a conversation, not as a battle but as a dance. And while he studies, the morning sun becomes brighter, the room becomes warmer, and his mind becomes more present, more grounded, more open. But then another challenge appears, not a distraction this time, but something more subtle, something that grows slowly like a shadow, boredom. At first it is just a small feeling, a soft whisper, but then it becomes stronger, a heaviness in his eyes, a slow tiredness in his thoughts, and he puts down his pen and rubs his forehead, because now he feels stuck, not because he can't focus, but because the material feels dry, and he wonders how he can stay focused when the content does not excite him, and this question becomes a new moment of exploration, a new doorway in his learning journey. Because he realizes that focus is not only about fighting distractions and calming the mind, it is also about finding meaning in what he studies, finding a spark, a connection, a reason that makes the learning feel alive, and so he closes his book for a moment and thinks deeply about why he is studying this subject, what it means to him, what it can bring to his future, and as he reflects, he finds a small answer, not a big one, just a small one. He is studying because he wants to grow. He wants to improve. He wants to build a life where he feels capable, confident, prepared, and he knows that every page he reads, even the boring ones, take him one step closer to that future, and when he remembers this, the boredom softens, the heaviness lifts a little, and he reopens the book with a calmer heart, ready to continue, not because the material suddenly became exciting, but because he reconnected to his purpose, and purpose is a powerful kind of focus. A focus that comes from inside, not from outside. And as he continues, the hours pass quietly, the tea grows cold, the sun climbs higher into the sky, and Daniel learns something new, something unexpected. He learns that focus is not a single skill, it is a combination of many small skills. Understanding your thoughts, calming your mind, observing distractions, returning without judgment, reconnecting to your purpose, and all these skills together create the kind of deep, gentle attention that helps you study in a peaceful and steady way, and when he finally closes his book, he feels a warm satisfaction inside him, not because he memorized everything, not because he studied for a long time, but because he learned something meaningful about himself, something that gives him more confidence for the days ahead. And he thinks to himself that maybe the mind is like a small child, curious, energetic, easily distracted, and maybe the best way to guide it is not with force, but with kindness, with patience, with gentle direction. And as this thought grows inside him, he feels another shift, another moment of realization, because he knows that if he can treat his mind with kindness, then studying will feel less like a struggle and more like a journey, a slow, patient, beautiful journey toward understanding. And now the afternoon light begins to stretch across the floor of his room, long, soft lines of golden color, and Daniel stands up from his chair, walks to the window, and looks outside at the quiet street, the gentle movement of the trees, the calm sky where a few clouds pass slowly, and he feels a quiet gratitude inside him, gratitude for the morning, for the learning, for the small discoveries about his mind, and he thinks about the conversation he had with himself earlier. The conversation about purpose, about meaning, about why he studies, and he whispers softly, "I am learning how to learn," and as he says this, he feels proud, not because he is perfect, not because he has mastered focus, but because he is growing, little by little, step by step, and he knows that this growth will continue, and that every day he will understand his mind a little more, and focus a little better, and study a little deeper, and this becomes the takeaway of this second part of his journey, that the mind will wander, But wandering is not a problem. Wandering is natural, and true focus is not the absence of wandering thoughts. True focus is the practice of returning gently, patiently, again and again, until the returning becomes a habit. And the habit becomes strength, and the strength becomes clarity. And with this clarity, Daniel steps away from the window and prepares for the next chapter in his journey. The chapter where he will learn how to build habits, how to shape routines, and how to create a study environment that supports focus every single day. In this next part of Daniel's journey, the story opens on a quiet evening when the sky is turning a soft orange and the day is slowly fading into night, and Daniel is sitting by his window again, this time not studying, not reading, simply thinking. Thinking about the morning he just lived, thinking about the wandering thoughts he learned to accept, and thinking about the small feeling of progress warming his chest. And as he watches the sun dip lower, he begins to wonder about something new. Something that has been quietly growing in his mind for many days, the idea that maybe focus does not begin only with thoughts and feelings. Maybe focus also comes from the shape of your days, the shape of your routines, the small habits that you repeat again and again until they become part of who you are. And as he thinks about this, he remembers something his father once told him: your habits build your future. And at that time Daniel did not understand what it meant. But now, after the last 2 days of learning about his own mind, the sentence feels deeper, clearer, almost like a key that opens a new door, and he wonders what kind of habits he could build, what kind of routine could help him stay focused not just once, not just for one day, but every day, even when he feels tired, even when he feels bored, even when distractions are strong. And this question becomes the new hook in his journey. He stands up from the window, walks across his room, and sits on the floor, crossing his legs in a relaxed way, and there on the floor, surrounded by soft evening light, he begins to explore the idea of routines, and he asks himself simple questions. The kind of questions anyone might ask, but rarely answers honestly, questions like, what time of day do I feel most awake? When is my mind calm? When do I usually get distracted? What parts of my day make studying difficult? And the more he asks, the more he realizes that he has never taken the time to listen to himself this way, and he begins to see patterns he never noticed before. Like how he always tries to study late at night when he is tired, or how he starts studying without planning, without preparing, without warming up his mind, and he understands that his routine is not helping him focus. It is pushing him into a space where focus becomes harder, and once he sees this, he cannot ignore it, and he whispers softly, I need to rebuild my day. And when he says this, he feels both nervous and excited, because rebuilding a day is like rebuilding a small world, a world made of simple habits, and simple habits can change everything. And so Daniel decides to begin with something easy, something gentle, something he knows he can handle. He decides to choose a study time, not a perfect time, not a magical time, but a time when he feels the most alive, the most awake. And he remembers that the morning felt calm today, it felt clear, the light felt soft, and his mind felt steady after he woke up, and he thinks that maybe mornings are the right place to begin. So he says to himself, tomorrow morning, I study again, and this simple decision becomes the seed of a new habit, a habit that can grow if he takes care of it, and he knows that habits grow slowly. They need patience. They need consistency, they need repetition, and he promises himself not to break that promise easily. So after choosing the time, he chooses something else, the place, and he looks around his room and sees his desk, the one he cleaned yesterday, the one that felt peaceful and supportive, and he knows this will be his study place, his little corner of focus, his small island of calm in a noisy world. and choosing the place makes him feel another wave of calm, because now his studying has a home, a location, a physical space that his mind can connect with. But Daniel is not finished yet, because he understands that a routine is more than time and place. It is also about the actions that prepare the mind, the small rituals that tell the brain, it is time to learn now. And he thinks about what made yesterday feel helpful, and he remembers the warm tea, the quiet breathing, the slow start, the feeling of calm before opening the book, and he decides to make this a part of his routine too. So tomorrow morning he will wake up, wash his face, make tea, breathe for 1 minute, and then study. And the idea feels simple, friendly, doable, and the simplicity gives him confidence. Confidence that he can actually live this routine, not just dream about it. And as he plans these steps, he feels something growing inside him, a small excitement, a small desire to see if this routine will help him become the version of himself he wants to be, the version who studies with calm focus, with steady attention, with gentle clarity. The room is now darker, the sun almost gone, and Daniel turns on his warm desk lamp, creating a soft circle of light in the room, and in this light he writes in his notebook again, writing slowly, carefully, like these words matter deeply to him, and he writes, "My routine, morning, tea, breathing, focus," and when he finishes writing, he closes his notebook and places it neatly on the desk, and then he sits back in his chair and thinks about something that has been on his mind for years. Something he never fully understood until now. He always believed that some people are naturally focused and others are not. But today he feels differently. Today he feels that focus is not something people are born with. Focus is something people create by shaping their days in a way that supports their mind, supports their energy, supports their learning, and the idea makes him feel powerful in a quiet way, because if focus is something you can build, then he can build it too, slowly, patiently, with small steps. And as he continues thinking, he remembers a story his teacher once told the class about a musician who practiced at the same time every day, not because she loved practice every day, but because repeating the time and the place helped her mind prepare, helped her skill grow, helped her stay committed. And Daniel realizes that studying is similar. Studying also needs a rhythm, a routine, a kind of daily music that tells the mind what to do, and when, and how, and he wonders if his own routine will feel like that music, soft and steady, helping him enter a focused state more easily each day. But as these thoughts flow through him, a challenge quietly sneaks into his mind, a whisper of doubt, a small voice saying, "What if you fail? What if you cannot keep this routine?" And for a moment Daniel feels scared, because he has tried routines before, and he remembers how they fell apart after a few days, how his motivation disappeared, how the excitement faded, and how he returned to old habits. And this memory makes him feel uncertain, but then he takes a deep breath, a gentle one, and reminds himself of the lesson he learned yesterday, the lesson that the mind wanders and that wandering is okay, and he realizes that routines also wander, habits also break, and that is okay too. And he tells himself softly, it doesn't have to be perfect, it only has to continue. And when he says that, the fear becomes smaller, the doubt becomes lighter, and his determination becomes clearer. Because he understands that building a routine is not about never missing a day, it is about returning to the routine even when you miss a day, just like returning to your focus even when your thoughts wander. And with this calm understanding, Daniel feels ready to sleep, ready to rest, ready to wake in the morning and begin again. And as he prepares for bed, he feels a quiet excitement for tomorrow, not a loud excitement, not the kind that shakes your heart, but a soft excitement, like the gentle feeling you get before a new journey begins. And he whispers into the still night air, "Tomorrow, I begin my routine," and as the room becomes dark and calm, he slowly drifts into sleep, carrying this new intention with him into the quiet dreams of the night. When the morning finally arrives, soft and quiet, Daniel wakes earlier than usual, not because of an alarm, but because something inside him feels awake, almost alert, as if his mind remembers the promise he made last night. And as he sits up in bed, he notices the gentle morning light sliding across the room like a slow river of gold, and for a moment he just watches it, breathing calmly, letting the peaceful start of the day settle into his body, and then, with a quiet determination, he stands up, stretches his arms, and begins the routine he designed for himself, the routine he hopes will help him build focus day by day. He walks to the bathroom, washes his face with cool water, and when he looks at himself in the mirror, he sees not just a student, but a learner on a journey, someone who is not trying to be perfect, but trying to grow, and that thought alone gives him a small spark of motivation. Then he goes to the kitchen, makes his warm cup of tea, and while he waits for the water to boil, he stands in silence, enjoying the simple sounds of the morning, the soft hum of the kettle, the faint bird song coming through the window, the quiet breathing of the house before the world becomes busy. When the tea is ready, he carries it carefully back to his room and places it on the desk, watching the steam rise in slow curls, and he sits down, closes his eyes for 1 minute, and focuses on his breath, exactly as he planned last night. In that minute, his thoughts float around him like small clouds, and he does not push them away. He simply lets them pass, and when he opens his eyes, he feels a gentle stillness inside him, a small clarity, a sense of readiness that he did not have before. And he realizes that this little moment before studying is not just a step in the routine. It is a door to focus, a way to enter the study space with a calm mind instead of a chaotic one. He opens his notebook, takes a sip of tea, and begins reading the first chapter of the day, and almost immediately he feels a difference, a soft difference, but a real one, because his mind does not rush, it does not jump, it does not panic. It moves slowly and easily, following the words on the page like following a gentle river. As he studies, he starts to see something beautiful. The routine he created, this simple structure of morning, tea, breathing, and calm, is helping him focus without effort, without force, without stress, and he understands something powerful. Routines help the mind relax because the mind loves patterns. It loves knowing what comes next, and when the mind does not need to make decisions, it becomes quiet, smooth, and open to learning. And this realization fills him with a warm satisfaction, because for so long he believed that studying had to feel difficult, heavy, stressful, but now he sees that studying can feel light when the day around it supports it. And this makes him feel hopeful about the future, hopeful that he can build more habits that help him learn without fear. But just when everything feels calm and steady, a new challenge rises, not from the outside world, but from inside his own routine, because halfway through the chapter, Daniel suddenly feels the old distraction returning, the feeling of wanting to check his phone, the desire to pick it up and look at something, anything, and at first he feels frustrated because he hoped the routine would eliminate all distractions, but then he remembers what he learned yesterday, that distractions are natural, normal, and part of being human, and he takes a slow breath and gently returns to the chapter, and he smiles softly because he realizes something. Routines are not magic. They do not remove distractions completely, but they make it easier to return to the task, easier to refocus, easier to continue without falling into frustration, and this understanding helps him stay calm. As the minutes pass, Daniel continues reading, and when he finishes the chapter, he closes the book and feels something he did not expect, a small pride, a small joy, because even though he faced a distraction, he stayed with the routine. And the routine carried him through the moment, and he feels stronger because of it. He leans back in his chair and whispers to himself, "This is working," and the words feel soft but powerful because he does not say them with excitement. He says them with belief, with quiet confidence. And that confidence becomes another building block in his journey toward focus. Now the morning has fully arrived, the sun brighter, the world noisier, and Daniel stands up from his desk and takes a deep stretch, feeling awake, alive, and more connected to himself than he has in a long time. And as he looks around his room, he realizes that the routine has created something more than focus. It has created a feeling of control, a feeling that he is shaping his day instead of letting the day shape him, and that feeling is incredibly powerful. He makes his bed, organizes a few papers, and then sits down again to reflect, because reflection has become an important part of his journey, a way to understand not only what happened, but also how it made him feel. And he writes in his notebook, "Routines make focus easier, and then small steps work, and then I can do this." But as he reflects, he also notices a new thought forming, a thought he did not expect, a gentle idea whispering inside his mind. And the idea is, what if routines can also help in other parts of my life? And this question makes him curious, because he realizes that the calm he feels right now does not come only from studying. It comes from the way he started his morning, the way he guided his mind into the day, the way he created space for focus, and he wonders if he could do something similar for exercise, for sleep, for eating, for resting, for anything that matters to him. And this idea feels exciting, like discovering a secret door that leads to many new rooms, and he smiles at the possibility. But before he goes too far, he brings his attention back to the present, back to his current journey, because he knows that habits grow slowly, one at a time, and he does not want to overwhelm himself. So he decides to stay with this one routine for now, to let it grow, to let it become part of him, and he whispers softly, one step at a time, and the words feel grounding, like gentle weights keeping him steady on the path. As the morning ends and Daniel prepares for the rest of his day, he feels a quiet happiness, not loud, not dramatic, but peaceful, steady. The kind of happiness that comes from doing something meaningful, something that supports his future, something that helps him become the person he wants to be, and he carries this feeling with him as he leaves the room, ready to face the day with a calm mind and a steady heart. And this becomes the takeaway of this part of his journey, the realization that routines do not control you, they support you. They create a soft structure that holds your focus gently, like a hand guiding you through the day, and when you repeat these small habits, they slowly shape your mind, your energy, your confidence, and even your identity, until one day you look at yourself and realize that you have become someone who can focus naturally, calmly, and consistently. And so Daniel steps out into the bright morning, carrying his new routine like a quiet tool in his pocket, ready to use it again tomorrow, and the next day, and the next, because now he understands something deeper. Focus is not built in one moment. It is built in many moments repeated again and again, like soft stones placed carefully to form a strong path, and he is ready to walk that path with patience, with kindness, and with steady hope. The next chapter of Daniel's journey begins on a day that feels very different from the calm mornings before, because today the world outside is louder, the skies are bright and restless, and Daniel wakes not with peaceful energy, but with a strange heaviness in his body, a heaviness that makes him blink slowly and sigh before he even sits up, and as he looks around his quiet room, he feels something he has not felt in a few days. His mind is busy, fast, restless, full of noise, and even though he wants to stay calm, The thoughts rush in like a river after a storm, and he knows immediately that today will be a test of everything he has learned so far, a test of whether his routine, his understanding, and his new habits can hold steady when distractions grow strong. He stands up, stretches, and moves through his morning steps, but the peace he felt before does not come as easily, because today his thoughts are everywhere, thinking about messages, thinking about tasks, thinking about things he needs to do later, thinking about worries that appeared suddenly out of nowhere, and while he makes his tea he notices how tense his body feels, how tight his breath becomes, how his shoulders rise without him noticing, and he understands that this is not a normal morning. This is a distracted morning, and distraction is part of the journey too. When he returns to his room, he tries to follow the routine exactly, placing the tea on the desk, closing his eyes, breathing for a minute, but the minute feels long and uncomfortable because his thoughts do not float gently like before. They bounce around quickly, loudly, pulling him away from the present moment again and again, and he feels a small frustration rising in his chest, a tightness that whispers, "Why can't I focus today? Why is it harder now?" And for a moment he wants to give up. He wants to skip studying. He wants to take the easy path and distract himself with something fun. But then he remembers what he learned just days ago, the lesson that the mind naturally wanders, the lesson that wandering thoughts are not a failure, and he takes a slow breath and whispers to himself, "This is part of the process," and even though he still feels distracted, the words give him a little strength, a little calmness, enough to open his notebook and begin reading. But as he reads, the distractions become stronger, not weaker, because this time the distractions are not only thoughts, they are feelings, restlessness, impatience, irritation, and these feelings flow through him like waves that push him away from the shore again and again. And he feels himself losing focus every few seconds, reading one sentence, then thinking about something else, then reading the next sentence, then losing his place, and after a few minutes, he drops his pen and covers his face with his hands, feeling completely overwhelmed, and he whispers softly, "Why is this so hard today?" But then, in that moment of frustration, something important happens, something that begins to change the direction of his day. He remembers that real focus is not tested on easy days. Real focus is tested on difficult days, on restless days, on days when your mind refuses to sit still, and he slowly lowers his hands and sits back, breathing deeply, letting this thought settle inside him, and he realizes that today is not a failure. Today is a chance to grow stronger, because if he can learn to focus on a day like this, he can focus on any day. And with this new understanding, he decides to explore the distraction instead of fighting it. He asks himself gently, "Where is this feeling coming from? Why is my mind so loud today?" And as he listens to himself, he begins to see the answer. He slept later than usual last night. He ate quickly without paying attention. He worried about something small before bed. And all these little things created a busy atmosphere inside him, an atmosphere that followed him into the morning, and understanding this helps him soften, helps him see that distraction today is not his fault. It is simply the result of many small things mixing together, and he whispers softly, "It's okay," and the words feel like a warm blanket around his restless mind. He returns to the page and tries again, reading slowly, patiently, not demanding perfection, not expecting smooth focus, and for a few minutes it works, but then another distraction appears, this time stronger, his phone lighting up with a new notification. And the sound, the tiny vibration, breaks his concentration completely, and he feels frustration rising again, stronger than before, because even though he tried so hard to stay calm, the world keeps pulling his attention away. He picks up the phone, turns it over in his hand, and for a moment he feels the temptation to unlock it, to check, to scroll, to escape from the pressure of studying, but he stops himself and asks, "Is this helping me or hurting me?" And the question sits in his mind like a bright light, a simple but powerful question, and when he answers it honestly, "It is hurting me," he finally understands something he did not fully see before. Distraction is not only something that happens to you. Distraction is also something you choose, even without realizing it, and choosing to stay with the distraction is easy, but choosing to turn away from it is what builds strength. So he places the phone in the drawer again, deeper than before, and closes it slowly, and as he pulls his hand away, he feels a small victory, a quiet victory, because he chose the harder thing. He chose growth instead of comfort, and that choice alone makes him feel stronger. He returns to the desk, sips his tea, breathes slowly again, and begins reading once more, and even though the day still feels heavy, something has changed inside him, a small shift, because now he is not fighting the distractions with anger. He is observing them with patience, and this patience makes it easier to continue, easier to stay present, easier to move forward even when the mind shakes. And as he studies for the next half hour, he faces distraction after distraction, but each time he returns a little more calmly, a little more naturally, and this gives him a surprising realization. A realization that feels like a soft light turning on inside his chest. Focus is not the absence of distractions. Focus is the ability to return again and again, even when distractions pull you away. And this realization fills him with a deep sense of strength, because now he understands that the battle of distractions is not won by eliminating them. It is won by learning how to come back to the task without losing yourself in frustration. And as the morning continues and Daniel reaches the end of his study session, he closes his book slowly and leans back in his chair, feeling tired but proud, because this morning was one of the hardest he has faced, yet it became one of the most meaningful. And he whispers softly, "I can do this, even on difficult days," and the words fill him with quiet confidence, the kind that stays with you even after the moment has passed. He takes a deep breath, looks around his room, and feels a small but powerful truth settle inside him. Distractions will always exist, but his ability to rise above them is growing, and that growth will carry him forward, step by step, into the next part of his journey. After closing his book and resting for a moment, Daniel walks to the window and looks outside at the lively day unfolding. People are walking on the street, cars are passing by, and children are laughing in the distance. The world feels busy, bright, full of movement, and he realizes something simple but important. The world will never be completely quiet. Life will always have noise, always have interruptions, always have unexpected sounds and moments that try to steal attention. And as he stands there watching the scene outside, he understands that learning to focus does not mean waiting for perfect silence, because perfect silence almost never comes. Instead, learning to focus means learning to create calm inside yourself, even when the outside world is not calm, and this thought settles into his heart gently, like a soft breeze cooling a warm day. He returns to his desk, sits down slowly, and opens his notebook to write about what he just experienced. His handwriting is careful, thoughtful, almost slow like his breathing. "Today was hard," he writes, "but I stayed with it." Then, distractions are part of life. And then, focus happens inside me, not around me. Writing these lines helps him see the truth more clearly. It reminds him that every challenge he faced today taught him something he needed to learn. He reads the sentences again and again, letting them sink into his mind, letting them become part of him, part of the person he is becoming. But as he finishes writing, another thought rises inside him, a thought that surprises him with its freshness. He realizes that the strongest distractions are not always the ones you can see or hear, like phones, sounds, or people talking. They are the distractions inside your own mind, the ones that whisper doubts, fears, expectations, or worries. These internal distractions are the hardest to face because they feel personal, emotional, and sometimes heavy. And Daniel begins thinking about something that happened earlier that morning, something he did not notice deeply at the time. When he felt frustrated, his mind immediately created negative thoughts. Thoughts like, I can't focus today, or I'm failing, or I'm not good at this. And he realizes now that those thoughts were distractions too, very powerful ones, because they didn't just pull his attention away, they made him feel smaller, weaker, unsure. He closes his eyes for a moment and observes his thoughts carefully, imagining them as small boats floating on a river. Some boats are calm and peaceful, carrying helpful thoughts, but some boats are shaky, carrying doubts and fear, and he watches them pass on the river of his mind without jumping into the boats, without following them, and he feels something interesting happen inside him. When he watches the thoughts instead of believing them, they lose some of their power, they become lighter, easier to let go of. He breathes deeply, slowly, and he feels a quiet understanding forming inside him. Distraction is not only something that pulls your eyes away, distraction is anything that pulls your heart away from the moment. He sits with this understanding for a long moment, and then he does something simple but brave. He writes one more sentence in his notebook, I will be gentle with myself on difficult days. And when the words appear on the page, something in his chest softens. For the first time, he feels he is not fighting his distractions like enemies. He is learning from them, understanding them, accepting them as part of the journey, and this acceptance brings him a quiet peace he didn't expect. Now Daniel stands up again, stretches his arms slowly, letting the tension from the morning release from his shoulders, and he begins to notice how different his body feels compared to when he first woke up. He feels lighter, calmer, more at peace, and he realizes that he didn't get rid of the distractions. He simply learned how to live through them without being controlled by them. He walks around his room in small circles, still thinking, still reflecting, still carrying the lessons of the morning in his heart. He thinks about the people he knows, friends, classmates, teachers, and he remembers how often he heard them say, I can't study today because it's too noisy, or I'll start when I feel calm, or I can only work when everything is perfect. And he understands now how untrue this is, because waiting for everything to be perfect means waiting forever. Life is always imperfect. Mornings will be messy, minds will be noisy, feelings will be scattered, and yet learning can still happen, focus can still grow, and progress can still be made. And when he understands this, he feels grateful for his difficult morning because it gave him the chance to learn something deeper than he ever learned on a calm day. As the afternoon light begins to soften, Daniel returns to his desk one more time, not to study, but to reflect again, because reflection has become a quiet habit for him, a gentle way to understand each step of his journey. He writes about the different kinds of distractions he faced today, the noise of his thoughts, the feelings in his body, the phone vibration, the restless energy, and then he writes what he learned from each one. Thoughts come and go. Feelings change. Phones can wait. Returning is more important than staying perfect. The more he writes, the more he sees that distractions are teachers, not enemies, and this changes the way he feels about them. He no longer fears distraction. He understands it, and understanding gives him power. Then another idea comes to him, a soft but meaningful one. Maybe he can create a plan for distracted days, a gentle plan, not a strict one. He imagines what such a plan might look like, starting slower, taking more breaks, being kinder to himself, keeping the goals small, focusing on consistency rather than perfection, and the idea feels comforting, like giving himself a soft place to land on days when his mind is not calm. Not every day needs to be perfect, he whispers to himself. I just need to keep going. And these words feel like a warm hug from the inside, reminding him that progress is not about speed, but about direction. As the day comes to an end and the sky begins to turn orange again, Daniel sits quietly in his room, feeling the gentle weight of everything he learned. The morning began with difficulty, with noise and frustration, but it is ending with clarity, with understanding, with strength. And he realizes that the battle of distractions is not a battle you win once. It is a battle you learn to move through, a battle you become better at facing each time, until one day the distractions no longer scare you, because you know you can return to focus no matter how far your mind wanders. He closes his notebook, places it neatly on the desk, and smiles softly to himself, because today, even though it was hard, he grew stronger. And as he turns off the lamp and lets the room fall into gentle darkness, he feels a quiet confidence settle inside him, a confidence that will carry him into the next part of his journey. A part where he will begin to build not only routines and calmness, but also motivation, purpose, and inner resilience. The next part of Daniel's journey begins on a morning that feels different again, not because it is quiet or loud, easy or difficult, but because Daniel wakes with a question inside him. A question that arrived softly during the night and stayed with him as he opened his eyes. A question that will guide the next part of his growth. Why do I study at all? And as he sits up in bed, looking at the early light painting soft shapes on the wall, he feels this question move through him like a gentle wave, simple but powerful, and it makes him pause, because although he studies every day now, although his routine is growing stronger, although he is learning to face distractions with patience, he realizes something surprising. He has never truly explored the deeper reason behind his studying. He has goals, yes, small goals and big goals, but goals are not the same as motivation, and this morning the difference becomes clear to him. He walks to the kitchen, makes his warm tea again, and as he waits for the water to boil, he leans against the counter and lets the question take shape inside him. Why do I study? He whispers softly, almost asking the air around him, and the words feel both heavy and light, like something simple that hides something important. When he returns to his room with his tea in hand, he does not sit at his desk immediately. Instead, he sits on the floor near the window, his back resting against the wall, his eyes watching the gentle morning light. And there, in the quiet of that moment, he begins to explore the question slowly, gently, the way someone explores a memory or a dream. At first, he thinks about practical reasons, passing the exam, finishing school, getting good grades, and these reasons matter, yes, but they feel thin, almost like paper, too light to hold on to. Then he thinks about responsibilities, about making his family proud, about preparing for the future, about not falling behind, and these reasons feel heavier, but also pressured, almost like carrying a stone that is not truly his. And then he sits even more deeply with the question, letting it sink into him like water sinking into dry soil, and suddenly he remembers something small but important. A moment years ago when he read a book that made him feel something amazing. A feeling of opening, like a door inside him had swung wide and fresh air rushed in, and he remembers thinking at that time, I want to understand the world like this, and the memory fills him with a soft warmth because it reminds him that learning was once something he loved, something that felt exciting, not heavy or stressful. He closes his eyes and lets that memory fill him for a moment. The joy of learning something new, the feeling of curiosity waking up inside him, the excitement of connecting ideas together, and suddenly he understands something beautiful and simple. Motivation is not about pressure, not about fear, not about pleasing others. Motivation is about desire, about wanting to grow, wanting to improve, wanting to understand. And when this understanding settles into him, he feels a small fire begin to glow inside his chest, a fire that feels soft but real, like the beginning of warmth after a long, cold day. He brings his notebook to his lap and begins writing, not fast, not with pressure, but slowly, thoughtfully, like someone writing a letter to himself. "Why do I study?" he writes at the top of the page. "Because I want to grow. Because I want to feel confident. Because I want to understand the world. Because I want to build a future I choose." And when he finishes writing these lines, he reads them again and again, and each time the words feel deeper, more true, more connected to who he really is. He realizes that true motivation comes from inside, not from outside, and that when he studies with this deeper purpose in mind, the studying feels lighter, easier, more meaningful. He takes a slow breath, feeling the warmth of the tea in his hands and the warmth of the motivation inside his chest, and then he stands and moves to his desk, not because he must, but because he wants to, and that difference feels powerful. He starts his routine tea, breathing, calm, and this time the breathing feels different, calmer, clearer, because now he is not only preparing his mind for focus, he is preparing his heart for purpose. When he opens his book and begins to study, something unexpected happens. The words on the page feel alive, interesting, even beautiful in a small way, because now they connect to something inside him, something warm and hopeful. The studying does not feel like a task anymore. It feels like part of his growth, part of his identity, part of the person he wants to become. As he reads, he notices that his focus is stronger today, but not because the distractions have disappeared. In fact, he still hears noises outside. He still feels thoughts moving through his mind, but the distractions feel smaller now, less important, less powerful. It is as if his newfound purpose has shifted the balance inside him, making the studying feel more meaningful than the distractions feel tempting. And this realization feels like another warm flame inside him, growing slowly, bringing light to places that once felt dark. However, as the minutes pass, a new challenge arrives, not in the form of distraction, but in the form of doubt, a soft but powerful question that appears in his mind. What if my motivation disappears again? And for a moment, the fear returns, the fear that motivation is something fragile, something that appears one day and disappears the next, something that cannot be trusted. He feels his chest tighten, his breath shorten, and the familiar whisper of fear creeps into his thoughts. But instead of letting the fear take control, Daniel pauses, lowers the book, and closes his eyes, and he begins to explore the doubt with the same gentle curiosity he explored distraction. What if motivation disappears? He asks himself. Does that mean the journey stops? And then he remembers something he learned earlier in his journey, something important. Motivation is like weather. It changes, it moves, it rises and falls, and no one can feel motivated every day. But growth does not depend on motivation alone. Growth depends on habits, on routines, on resilience, on the ability to continue even when the fire is small or quiet. And he realizes that the purpose he discovered today is not a moment of excitement. It is a direction, a compass, something he can return to again and again, even on days when the fire is dim. This understanding helps him breathe again, helps him feel calmer, and he whispers softly, "Motivation may change, but my purpose stays." And as the words leave his lips, the doubt loosens its grip, and he feels strong again, steady, grounded. He returns to his book, not with fear but with clarity, and the studying becomes gentle again. As the hour passes, Daniel finishes his chapter and closes the book slowly, feeling not tired but quietly energized, like the learning has filled him rather than drained him. And as he sits back in his chair, he feels a new, deeper truth settling inside him. Motivation is not a fire that burns constantly. It is a fire you feed slowly, with purpose, with habits, with reflection, with small victories, and with kindness toward yourself. And when you feed the fire, even gently, even slowly, it can grow strong enough to guide you through many days, even difficult ones. This becomes the beginning of Daniel's new understanding, the foundation for the next part of his journey, where he will learn to build resilience, discipline, and emotional strength, not only for studying, but for all parts of his life. And as he sits quietly in the soft morning light, he feels ready to carry this new fire with him, ready to explore what it means to stay motivated through challenges, ready to become stronger from the inside out. Later in the day, when the sun begins to rise higher and the air grows warmer, Daniel takes a short break from studying and walks outside for a few minutes, letting the fresh air touch his face and the gentle wind brush against his arms. As he walks slowly down the quiet street, he continues thinking about everything he discovered earlier, the question of motivation, the memory of his curiosity, the warm fire he felt growing inside. And he realizes that motivation is not something that simply appears out of nowhere. It is something you invite, something you create, something you protect. And as he walks, he watches the people around him, an old man sitting on a bench reading a newspaper, a woman walking her dog, a teenager riding a bike, and he wonders what motivates them, what moves their hearts, what goals and dreams they carry in their daily routines, and the thought makes him feel connected to the world in a gentle, peaceful way. He sits down on a bench under a small tree and closes his eyes for a moment, letting the sounds around him blend together, the soft rustling of leaves, the distant hum of cars, the faint laughter of children. And all these sounds make him think about something important. Life is always moving, always changing, always creating new moments, and motivation too must move with life, must grow and shift, must be renewed again and again. He realizes that the biggest mistake he made before was believing that motivation comes only from inspiration, from excitement, from sudden energy. But now he sees that motivation can also come from small things like a calm moment, a simple thought, a memory, or even a dream. And this understanding helps him see the journey differently, more kindly, more patiently. As he sits there, he begins thinking about his future, not in a stressful way, but in a hopeful, warm way. He imagines himself months or even years from now, more confident, more skilled, more steady, and he imagines looking back at this moment, at this bench, at this day, and feeling grateful that he did not give up, grateful that he learned to understand motivation instead of waiting for it. This picture in his mind becomes a soft but powerful image, a future version of himself gently guiding him forward. And with this image, he feels the fire in his chest glow a little brighter. When he returns home, he decides to do something he has never done before. He sits at his desk, opens a new page in his notebook, and writes the words "my reasons" at the top. Then, slowly and calmly, he begins writing all the reasons he wants to study, all the reasons he wants to grow, all the reasons he wants to improve. The list is personal, gentle, honest. Some reasons are big, some are small, some are emotional, some are simple, but together they create a map of his heart, a map of his inner fire. When he finishes writing, he reads the list aloud softly, letting each reason land inside him, letting each word remind him of who he is becoming. He notices something interesting as he reads. Some reasons make him smile, some make his chest feel warm, some make him sit up straighter, and some make him inhale deeply as if filling himself with new strength. And when he finishes reading, he feels a wave of clarity wash through him. He realizes that his reasons are not just words, they are roots, the roots that will hold him steady when challenges come, the roots that will nourish him when the days feel difficult, the roots that will remind him why he started in the first place. And in that moment, he understands something powerful. Motivation is not something you wait for. Motivation is something you build with your reasons. With this new understanding, he decides to do something else. He chooses one reason from the list, just one, the one that feels strongest today, and he writes it on a small piece of paper. Then he tapes the paper to the wall above his desk, placing it where he can see it every day when he sits down to study. The reason he chooses is simple and honest. I want to feel proud of myself. And when he looks at the words, he feels a deep quietness inside, the kind of quietness that brings confidence rather than fear. The next morning, when Daniel wakes again, he feels the leftover warmth from the day before. He feels calm, steady, ready, and when he sits down to study, he looks at the small piece of paper on the wall and lets the words guide him. I want to feel proud of myself. And suddenly the studying becomes more meaningful again. He reads more carefully, listens more patiently, practices more openly, because now he knows he is not studying only for exams or grades. He is studying for himself, for the person he wants to grow into. But as hours pass, a new challenge appears, not distraction, not doubt, but something different, tiredness. His eyes feel heavy, his mind feels slow, his energy feels soft and low, and he wonders for a moment if he should push through it or rest. And then he remembers something very important. Motivation does not mean pushing yourself until you break. Motivation means understanding what your body needs, what your mind needs, and what your heart needs. So instead of forcing himself to continue, he stands up, stretches gently, walks around the room, drinks water, and gives himself a small rest. And as he rests, he feels grateful that he is finally learning how to balance effort with care. When he returns to his desk, he feels slightly refreshed, and he begins studying again, not quickly but calmly, and this time the learning feels almost enjoyable, almost like he is having a quiet conversation with the ideas in the book. And as he continues reading, a realization gently forms inside him. Motivation grows when you treat yourself with kindness, not with pressure. He remembers the days when he pushed himself too hard, when he tried to study without rest, when he felt guilty for feeling tired, and he sees now how heavy those moments were, how they drained him instead of lifting him. But today feels different, lighter, warmer, more balanced, and this difference comes from the new understanding he gained. Later that evening, when the sky turns dark and the streetlights begin to glow softly, Daniel sits by his window again, holding a cup of warm tea. The day has been long, but meaningful, and he feels grateful for every moment, every discovery, every reflection, every spark of motivation. He thinks about how much he has changed in the last few days, how much he has learned about himself, about focus, about distraction, and now about motivation, and he feels a softness in his heart, a softness that feels like peace. He watches the small lights outside, flickering like stars, and he whispers to himself, I am growing, and the words feel true. Not loud, not dramatic, but true in a deep and steady way. And in that quiet truth, he feels something else, something strong and gentle at the same time, a commitment. A quiet promise to himself that he will continue, that he will keep learning, that he will keep growing, that he will keep feeding the fire inside him even when the flames are small. He finishes his tea, places the cup on his desk, and closes his eyes with a long, slow breath, feeling his heart settle into calmness. And in the calm of that moment, He senses the next chapter approaching, a chapter where he will learn not only about focus and motivation, but about discipline, resilience, and the quiet strength that comes from showing up every day, even when things are not perfect. The following morning, Daniel wakes with a sense of calm curiosity, different from the restless mornings he once knew, different from the heavy mornings of distraction, and even different from the bright but gentle mornings of motivation. Today feels quieter, steadier, as if the world is inviting him to take the next step, the step toward discipline, a word that once felt strict and cold, but now begins to feel warm and guiding, like a friend who quietly leads you forward. As he stretches and stands, he notices how his body feels lighter, how his mind feels alert, and he realizes that discipline is not about force or punishment. It is about showing up, step by step, even when the excitement fades, even when distractions appear, even when motivation is low. It is about creating a path and then walking on it, slowly, patiently, persistently, one small step at a time. He begins his morning routine with tea and breathing, but this time he focuses not only on calming his mind, but also on honoring the practice itself. Each motion, each step, feels intentional, deliberate, as if the routine itself is a gentle teacher showing him how small, repeated actions build strength. When he opens his book and begins reading, he notices that the words seem more accessible today, not because the material has changed, but because he has changed. His mind is steadier, his focus more reliable, his heart aligned with a sense of purpose. He reads slowly, pausing at moments that feel significant, taking time to let the meaning settle into him, and when he encounters a difficult paragraph or an idea that challenges him, he does not rush or become frustrated. Instead, he breathes, rereads, and gently works through it. As the morning progresses, Daniel realizes that discipline is not about achieving perfection or completing everything without error. It is about commitment, about returning to the work again and again, even after pauses, even after mistakes, even after moments of frustration. He thinks about the days when he skipped studying because he felt tired, the days when he abandoned tasks because he felt distracted, and he sees now that discipline is not punishment, it is forgiveness. It is forgiving himself for being human, and yet continuing the journey anyway, with care, patience, and consistency. This understanding feels both freeing and empowering, a combination he has never felt before. At one point, Daniel's mind drifts, as it always does, to thoughts of games, entertainment, and easier pleasures that could tempt him away from his studies. A small tug of impatience appears, whispering, "Why not stop now? Take a break? Relax?" And he notices the feeling, without judgment, observing it like a small cloud passing in a clear sky. He takes a breath, smiles softly, and gently reminds himself, "I will return. This is my path." And the small act of saying this, saying it slowly and meaningfully, strengthens him in ways he did not anticipate. Discipline, he realizes, is not harsh or rigid. It is tender and self-directed, a choice that becomes stronger each time it is practiced. Around midday, Daniel pauses to reflect. He writes in his notebook about the morning, about the small victories, about the moments when he returned to focus instead of giving in to distraction. Each line he writes solidifies the habit, creating a record of consistency, a reminder that growth is not sudden, but gradual, and that the path of discipline is built through repeated, intentional actions. He notices how this record itself motivates him, because he can see the proof of his effort, the evidence that he is capable of following through, that he can trust himself, that he can create a steady rhythm in his life. And the realization fills him with a quiet satisfaction, a calm pride that does not shout, but whispers gently to his heart. As the afternoon arrives, Daniel encounters the first real challenge of the day. A message appears on his phone, a sound he had chosen to ignore before, and the temptation to check it is strong, almost magnetic. For a moment, he feels the pull of old habits, the desire to escape from the gentle discipline he is practicing. But then he remembers the lessons of focus and motivation. Distraction is part of life, but he can choose his response. He places the phone down, away from his immediate reach, and instead closes his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his choice. In this small act, he discovers the essence of discipline, choosing the harder, more meaningful action over the easier, fleeting one, and in choosing it, feeling a sense of quiet victory that no external reward could match. Time passes, and Daniel notices the subtle changes inside himself. The mind that once wandered so easily, the heart that once felt restless when tasks seemed difficult, the body that once grew tense at the first sign of challenge, all these elements now respond differently. The mind can return more quickly, the heart can settle more calmly, the body can relax more naturally. Discipline, he begins to understand, is not a rule imposed from outside. It is a natural alignment between intention, action, and awareness. And when intention and action move together in this way, even small moments become powerful, even simple tasks become meaningful, even difficult challenges become opportunities for growth. By the evening, Daniel sits at his desk with his notebook closed and his mind quiet. He reflects on the day and realizes that he has discovered something deeper. The fire of motivation is important, but without discipline, it can flicker and fade. Discipline is the structure that allows the fire to continue burning, even when the initial excitement dims. Motivation is the spark, discipline is the fuel, and together they create a steady flame that can illuminate the path forward, no matter how long or challenging the journey may be. As the sun sets, painting the sky with soft oranges and purples, Daniel looks outside and feels the weight of the day settle gently into his chest. He smiles softly, understanding that discipline is not about perfection, speed, or brilliance. It is about patience, care, and persistence. It is about learning to return, again and again, to the work that matters, and in doing so, discovering strength and confidence that can carry him through every part of life. Different from the restless mornings he once knew, different from the heavy mornings of distraction, and even different from the bright but gentle mornings of motivation. Today feels quieter, steadier, as if the world is inviting him to take the next step, the step toward discipline, a word that once felt strict and cold, but now begins to feel warm and guiding, like a friend who quietly leads you forward. As he stretches and stands, he notices how his body feels lighter, how his mind feels alert, and he realizes that discipline is not about force or punishment. It is about showing up, step by step, even when the excitement fades. Even when distractions appear, even when motivation is low. It is about creating a path and then walking on it, slowly, patiently, persistently, one small step at a time. He begins his morning routine with tea and breathing, but this time he focuses not only on calming his mind, but also on honoring the practice itself. Each motion, each step, feels intentional, deliberate, as if the routine itself is a gentle teacher showing him how small, repeated actions build strength. When he opens his book and begins reading, he notices that the words seem more accessible today, not because the material has changed, but because he has changed. His mind is steadier, his focus more reliable, his heart aligned with a sense of purpose. He reads slowly, pausing at moments that feel significant, taking time to let the meaning settle into him, and when he encounters a difficult paragraph or an idea that challenges him, he does not rush or become frustrated. Instead, he breathes, rereads, and gently works through it. As the morning progresses, Daniel realizes that discipline is not about achieving perfection or completing everything without error. It is about commitment, about returning to the work again and again, even after pauses, even after mistakes, even after moments of frustration. He thinks about the days when he skipped studying because he felt tired, the days when he abandoned tasks because he felt distracted, and he sees now that discipline is not punishment. It is forgiveness. It is forgiving himself for being human and yet continuing the journey anyway, with care, patience, and consistency. This understanding feels both freeing and empowering, a combination he has never felt before. At one point, Daniel's mind drifts, as it always does, to thoughts of games, entertainment, and easier pleasures that could tempt him away from his studies. A small tug of impatience appears, whispering, "Why not stop now? Take a break? Relax?" And he notices the feeling, without judgment, observing it like a small cloud passing in a clear sky. He takes a breath, smiles softly, and gently reminds himself, "I will return. This is my path." And the small act of saying this, saying it slowly and meaningfully, strengthens him in ways he did not anticipate. Discipline, he realizes, is not harsh or rigid. It is tender and self-directed, a choice that becomes stronger each time it is practiced. Around midday, Daniel pauses to reflect. He writes in his notebook about the morning, about the small victories, about the moments when he returned to focus instead of giving in to distraction. Each line he writes solidifies the habit, creating a record of consistency, a reminder that growth is not sudden, but gradual, and that the path of discipline is built through repeated, intentional actions. He notices how this record itself motivates him, because he can see the proof of his effort, the evidence that he is capable of following through, that he can trust himself, that he can create a steady rhythm in his life. And the realization fills him with a quiet satisfaction, a calm pride that does not shout, but whispers gently to his heart. As the afternoon arrives, Daniel encounters the first real challenge of the day. A message appears on his phone, a sound he had chosen to ignore before, and the temptation to check it is strong, almost magnetic. For a moment, he feels the pull of old habits, the desire to escape from the gentle discipline he is practicing. But then he remembers the lessons of focus and motivation. Distraction is part of life, but he can choose his response. He places the phone down, away from his immediate reach, and instead closes his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of his choice. In this small act, he discovers the essence of discipline, choosing the harder, more meaningful action over the easier, fleeting one, and in choosing it, feeling a sense of quiet victory that no external reward could match. Time passes, and Daniel notices the subtle changes inside himself. The mind that once wandered so easily, the heart that once felt restless when tasks seemed difficult, the body that once grew tense at the first sign of challenge, all these elements now respond differently. The mind can return more quickly, the heart can settle more calmly, the body can relax more naturally. Discipline, he begins to understand, is not a rule imposed from outside. It is a natural alignment between intention, action, and awareness. And when intention and action move together in this way, even small moments become powerful, even simple tasks become meaningful, even difficult challenges become opportunities for growth. By the evening, Daniel sits at his desk with his notebook closed and his mind quiet. He reflects on the day and realizes that he has discovered something deeper. The fire of motivation is important, but without discipline, it can flicker and fade. Discipline is the structure that allows the fire to continue burning, even when the initial excitement dims. Motivation is the spark, discipline is the fuel, and together they create a steady flame that can illuminate the path forward, no matter how long or challenging the journey may be. As the sun sets, painting the sky with soft oranges and purples, Daniel looks outside and feels the weight of the day settle gently into his chest.